Okay, welcome, friends. You are looking today at the AI Grant Writing Learning Series ChatGPT Prompts Google Doc. I wanted to share this with you because it is coming your way. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. It's coming out in the next newsletter. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on this so that you can see what we've got going on here. I'm going to flesh this out a little bit before you get it, I promise. But there's some key items to keep in mind that will be at the top of this document. This is what I'm building out and will continue to build out as we look through some of the prompts that I put in for this application. I also should start this call off or this posting today by saying we did it. We submitted the grant as of what was that, 10 a.m. this morning, which is super exciting. First time that I've ever submitted something with the assistance of others as a bid through a state agency. It's a big deal, in my opinion. So that is behind us, which is very exciting. And then what I'm going to be copying over for you guys here is the grant application section and then connecting that to the actual prompt that I used. And so this is summarizing existing plan content. And I have the prompt and that kind of thing too. It's all in quotes. That way you can take it. So with that, what I thought I would do is walk you through the questions that I put in here instead of working with the document itself, because I think it's going to be easier for me to explain to you what's happening here and I can provide context about where the question was coming from. I think that's going to be the most useful. So let's dig into it. I also do want to note that there are a lot of other topics over here, and you can clearly you can see, I'm struggling to understand how to calculate a fringe benefit rate. All right, I'm looking at developing a greenhouse production plan. The cool thing is that when you are creating conversations like these, it will find a way to summarize your first question into a few words, and then it will give you a title for your thread. So if I went into another one, I could basically pick up where I left off, and it would essentially follow through using some of the information from before if you needed that to continue generating content. So for that reason, and to keep things organized, because that's something that's really important to me, I decided to keep all of my prompts for this grant application in a single thread. So you can see over here this tiny little cursor. And when I scroll, there's a lot of content here. And we're going to make our way through that so that you can learn along the way. Digging into this, just a reminder, the first prompt, the first couple of prompts we've already talked through. We wanted to give this bot a persona. So we said, you're a grant writer with 15 years experience. You've been tasked with helping the Regional Food Council of West Central Minnesota apply for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's local climate action grant, blah, blah, blah. And then we asked them about providing potential outcomes. And I will say these, for the most part, stayed the same. We focused on community resilience was one, reducing the carbon footprint was another, and then I think food security or food equity was one of the other ones that we ended up going with in the final application. One of the tools that I used was summarizing content and reducing it. This is a key element when you're dealing with word counts. This is one of my favorite ways, and you'll see that I use it quite frequently throughout this entire thread. So I took 2 different paragraphs about the climate action plan that had come from the actual climate plan, and I asked it to make it smaller, and it did. The next thing that I did was I asked it to outline 4 measurable environmental and human health outcomes as a result of the following proposal activities as part of this grant application. I said, please list the ways that you would measure these outcomes. That's essentially what they were asking for in this application. It said, okay, what are your priorities? And then there was a specific line item about explaining specifically what are the human and environmental health outcomes that you plan on measuring as part of this work. And so that's why I included in the second part, please list the ways that you would measure these outcomes. So we have that there, and it looks like I must have done a first revision. So you can see how many times I've put in or revised the prompt. And so if you go back to the first one, So in the first one, I just said, please outline the potential outcomes. In the second one, I added, please list the ways that you would measure these outcomes. And evidently that came from me not having those measurable pieces. So this is essentially what we ended up landing on for our outcomes: increase community resilience. And then we took some of these items from the measurement, but not all of them. Tracking of, I think this is the one we ended up using, tracking of community-led initiatives launched as a result of council discussions. And then we had some survey information, but it wasn't necessarily about climate change impacts. It was more an understanding of the link between climate change and food systems, was kind of our before and after in terms of survey data that we were going to come up with. The next thing that we had under enhanced regional food security was looking at sales from the farmers market that's starting up in Parker's Prairie as an indirect way of kind of looking at, okay, community connection, but then also reducing carbon emissions. And it seemed unrealistic to me, given our project time period, to be measuring food security levels before and after a year. Like, it just didn't seem like that would be setting us up for success. So I was thinking more about, okay, what can we measure within a shorter time period that's still going to show change? Because being able to look at food security, I mean, that's a really big thing. That's multi-year. I would look at that over maybe a 5 or 10-year period. But because this was only a 12-month project period, I just got rid of that one. And then an analysis of food distribution networks. Again, that would be a longer term change, and we only had 12 months. So I also didn't use that. Reduced regions' carbon footprint. This one is looking at emissions reduced through the initiatives of our food council, such as supporting local agriculture and reducing food waste. We ended up massaging that a bit. So like I said, we're using farmers market sales to compare emissions for local foods versus ones that would be imported. And we didn't really focus on the agricultural production techniques used for this. It was more focused on community connection type things. The next one that we have is increased awareness of agricultural innovation opportunities. I believe this one ended up getting added to one of the other items. Like, we just had 3 outcomes ultimately. So this one, I think it just ended up getting matched. But we did talk about attendance rates being a way that we could measure the impact, and also tracking people's ability or willingness to take action after the meeting. Well, in this case, it's not really a meeting. We're basically planning on hosting an event that highlights agricultural innovation happening statewide, and hosting that for primarily people locally within this 4-county region to help them see what market channel opportunities are available to them outside of what they can immediately see in their community. The next one, project titles, right? We need to put this in on the top of this list. Projects or grant titles is so important because it's one of the hardest things to do. And this is what I did. I asked it, please draft 3 potential project titles based on the project description. And so then I just wanted to see what would happen. And it did such a good job. There's no way that I would have come up with this in such a short time. And this is the one that we ended up going with: sustaining our roots, fostering resilience and sustainability in West Central Minnesota's food system. I think as a reviewer, it gives you a very clear sense of the what and the where. And the others didn't necessarily emphasize that as much. And so I like that one the best. And then I like to encourage chat. So I'll say excellent at the beginning in a very friendly tone. And then I said, can you use the following project description to draft a project summary? And this is also what they came up with. I believe we ended up using that exactly as it was. And yes, so, okay, this is what they had. So this was the prompt, and then this is what it ended up spitting out. Proposed project aims to foster resilience, enhance food security, reduce carbon emissions, and promote innovation within West Central Minnesota's food and agricultural sectors. This multifaceted initiative will leverage the formation of a regional food council, online events, spotlighting agricultural innovation, and the allocation of implementation funds to support community-driven initiatives. I believe we used parts of this. Parts of it were really strong and made sense based on what the prompt was asking for, and other parts it didn't. So what I remember doing was taking some sentences and leaving others out based on what I knew about the bigger project and what would make the most sense to summarize it. And then it says, feel free to adjust or expand upon this draft as needed. And then I said, please use the same project description from above and the following information to respond to the prompt in 500 words or less. This is getting really specific, right? I'm talking about this thing that happened above, and I'm also linking it to more context to give it this bigger picture, including a word count, which is freaking awesome. I love this. So this was a really long prompt, and this was actually something that I had drafted, I believe, without the use of ChatGPT at all. What I did was I got this information from the Climate Action Plan, which had been written. And so what I was looking at is helping make the connection clear between what's happening with climate and what is happening within our food system, and how by investing in local food systems, you are indirectly having, well, or honestly, directly having an effect on climate resiliency. So there was a lot of content in here that talks about the trends that are happening within Minnesota's climate. And then one of the things that I had also written, again, this was before I started going through the grant application and realized that I wrote this in a section I wasn't supposed to. And in fact, the information wasn't even being asked of us. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to save this information and figure out if there's another way that I can use it in the future. And it did, in fact, end up becoming important for this section. So again, it ended with the quote, right? Sandwiching that information. And then what it spit out was beautiful. The proposed project is designed to enhance community resilience to climate change impacts in West Central Minnesota by addressing key vulnerabilities in the region's food system. Drawing upon current climate trends and future projections for Minnesota, the project employs a multifaceted approach to bolster resilience and adaptability to changing environmental conditions. It's so well done. It's really clear, and it outlines the different ways that it's doing this. So mitigating climate-related risks, focusing on enhancing regional food security, reducing carbon footprint. So it's organizing its response according to the outcomes that we had developed before, which from a grant reviewer's perspective, to keep your information organized in this way is critical. It's going to make it very easy for people to see this through line between the work plan, the application, and the budget. So being able to have that stuff really clear for people, it's going to go a long way toward people understanding, like, what are you trying to do? Okay, the next one, and of course I said fantastic because it was indeed. Please use the information from the previous prompt as well as the following description about environmental justice areas of concern to address the next question. So this is where I copied in the prompt, which was describe these communities, explain how they will benefit from the project, and or discuss whether there is a potential for harm to these communities from the project. And then it says, if there is potential for harm, discuss how the project will alleviate it. And I do remember this. I was scrolling down to see that there were two different prompts. So this was version 1. And then when I ended up landing on, let's see, did that go 2? Then I ended up revising my prompt to make it much smaller. And I said, please use the information from the previous prompt to address the next question. Because what I found was that the first prompt was too complicated and what it was giving me was not helpful. So then we went to this. Describe what groups will be engaged through this project to address climate change and how they'll be involved. Done. Like, keep that simple. And this is what resulted. Community residents, local organizations, institutions, local businesses and farmers, and it gives you some examples. What I did was I took that high level idea and then I started to flesh it out with examples from my local community of institutions, organizations, people that we're already working with where we've built the partnerships. And that again is something that as a grant reviewer, I'm looking to see what is the project readiness of this? Have they already established the relationships? Do they have buy-in from people? What I found really interesting about this particular application is that they didn't ask for any letters of support. And for most of the applications that I've seen, there's almost always a letter of support. And so my aspiration in making revisions to this was that by putting in some of our regional partners' names, it showed we're not just making this stuff up and it's not some pie in the sky idea about what we'd like to do. In fact, we've already built these relationships and we just want to move forward in deepening them. What I ended up doing was adding in a section that addressed that previous part. Because if you'll recall, there's things happening here around environmental justice areas of concern. There was this map that MPCA had, and if you've seen the previous videos, you already know, and we looked at that in depth together. So as we get into this, and yeah, that one's different. So what I ended up doing was pulling in other things from the map to that section that addressed one of those questions about who's going to benefit, how are they going to benefit, and particularly with some of those food security pieces, it's like, who is being served by this? And definitely folks that are struggling directly benefit from that work. The next one I had, please rephrase the following content to reduce it to 400 words. Again, reducing your word count. This can be an awesome tool for that. So that's what I did. And it did a really good job. And then the next one that I did, the proposed project engages a broad, I think that might have been because it was a lot of text, right? This is a lot of text. And then what we did was what it spit out in terms of reducing content. So this is talking about stakeholders. Okay, based on the information you have about this project, please respond to the following question in 200 words or less. Describe what, if any, co-benefits the deliverables will provide for the community to help ensure a lasting impact. And then I even included some of the examples that they had in that. And honestly, this was one of the ones that I changed the least. And I just wanted to see like what's going to happen because I could have given it a lot more information. I could have come up with these things myself. I know what those co-benefits are, but I was just curious. And it was really interesting to see what they had talked about. They said by promoting local food systems and supporting community-led initiatives, the project will increase access to healthy food, which is exactly in line with what we were saying. Everything in our plan says that. Thereby addressing food insecurity. Yes, that was one of our priorities, and improving public health outcomes, which is again, something that they had emphasized early on in the application. Additionally, initiatives such as the Parker's Prairie Farmers Market and online events highlighting agricultural innovation will serve as widely used community amenities, fostering social cohesion and economic vitality. This stuff is brilliant, right? It's got like all the right keywords that resonate with how I would have written this. And if not for providing the right content and context, there's no way that we would get this kind of information. So this is perfect. Moreover, by reducing reliance on long-distance food transportation, project can help decrease local greenhouse gas pollutants and mitigate environmental degradation. Again, this is part of the section of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's perfect. And then the next question that we asked, excellent, based on what you know about this project, can you identify 3 potential barriers or challenges and provide suggestions for how to address them? I do remember editing this one, and maybe I didn't end up coming back to that. Yeah, what I ended up putting in was based on a list that we had already generated as a planning team. And then I added these 2 because based on the context of what we were putting in our application, policy hurdles don't necessarily seem applicable, even though it's a food policy council. A lot of the work that we're doing is actually operating within the framework. And we have yet to get to the point of wanting to shift some of the policies. And this is something that you see nationwide. This tends to be the general trajectory of food policy councils, is they start with actionable things, the low hanging fruit, the immediate visible thing. And then they start to get into the space of policy advocacy at the local, state, and then federal level for the ones that are really gung ho. So that's been our approach in the work that we're doing. Next one. Could you add the following additional barriers into what the 3 items you just came up with? Yeah. This is where things got messy and where I was like, okay, this is not working. Just go back to square one. This was what we had written in terms of the notes that I took from our group discussion of time constraints, data collection and evaluation given the short time period of the project. And essentially what they want you to do is say, what's the problem? And then how are you going to navigate it? And you'll see I put in a second prompt and I'm curious to know what it ended up being. Oh, yeah, I just had the 2. I reduced it to 2 different challenges, and I took out the prompt with all the solutions up because it was getting confused, basically. And so I simplified what my prompt was. I gave it just the name of the challenge. And then this is what it came up with. And I really liked these first 2 because that was kind of already in line with what we were talking about. And then it added these, but honestly, I had content already for those 2, so I didn't worry about it. Okay. We're 22 minutes in, and I'm thinking based on where's the cursor? We're like 3/4 of the way through. I'm going to push pause on this video, and then we'll pick up with this next prompt.